important to us as a board member and as a devotee. She's a disciple of Swami Yogeshananda, and so we're very glad to have her come to us this morning to speak about mindfulness meditation. And the reason I'm moving over here is because I want to turn on the recorder.
Do you do an opening chant?
Yeah. Now, you tell me if both these lights come on top and bottom. Top,
And bottom.
sound.
Soft.
Okay, if I snap my fingers, does the bars go across?
Yes, the bars go across.
Okay. So, the reason I'm being attentive to that is last week's talk was not recorded because I didn't, it wasn't recorded on the audio because I wasn't attentive enough. So, again, we welcome Nina to speak with us about mindfulness meditation, and we will open with our normal chant encouraging us in our study of spirituality. Om Sahana Bhavatu
Sahano Bhunatu Saha Viryam Karavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being look over us from the knees of Mother and Father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill
To study together the art of spirituality.
May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Again, Nina, thank you for taking time to do this morning. We welcome you.
Good morning, everyone. I think we'll start with just a moment of silence and coming into presence. And if you wish, I invite you to close your eyes for just a moment. But just to kind of settle into our bodies. Just to kind of notice our bodies, our feet against the floor, the weight of our bodies in the chair. Knowing that we are indirectly through this connected to this earth, Mother Earth, who supports us, who nourishes us, who sustains us, where we live out our daily lives. And again, coming into the presence of this room, acknowledging the presence of those around us, of this community. And acknowledging the presence of that background awareness, that consciousness that manifests through all, that unites us, that intertwines us, that connects us. Namaste.
Namaste.
So, it's nice to be here. I do have to say that as soon as Brother Shankar asked me to talk about this, my connection to the center, how I came to be a part of this center, and then my own meditation practice. I don't know, it took maybe 10 or 15 seconds for doubt to set in. So for those of you who speak Pali, forgive the pronunciation of this, but this is a phrase from the recollection of the Triple Jewel. It says, Pachatam viditabu vinuhiti. Pachatam vinitabu vinuhiti, which means to be experienced individually by the wise. And so, you know, the doubt, because meditation has to be experienced individually by each of us. And for me to sit up here and talk about meditation is kind of like me sitting up here trying to tell you what it's like to eat an ice cream cone, right? I mean, you just kind of have to go try it yourself. I can talk about it all I want, but until you actually try it, until it's experienced by oneself, it's not known, can't be known. And so the doubt set in. And but I remembered, and many of you probably know this myth, the archetypal myth of the Buddha's awakening. So the Buddha, and at that point in time, he wasn't the Buddha yet, he was still Siddhartha, and he went and sat under the tree. And he sat under the tree all night and meditated, and the shadow god, Mara, the god of shadows, came and started slinging her arrows at him. Arrows of anger and doubt and greed and grasping and lust and pushing away and all of these shadow sides. And the Buddha combated those, and it said that those arrows fell as petals around him underneath the tree as he slayed the different arrows. But by the morning, when the sun began to rise, there was one final arrow that Mara still had to shoot at him, and that final arrow that he so struggled with, the last arrow, was actually the arrow of doubt. And what the Buddha did is that he actually reached out and he touched the earth. He touched Mother Earth. And in doing that, he allowed himself to open up to something that was bigger than him. He took his smaller egoic mind and put it aside and said, no, there's something more, there's something bigger, and I'm going to surrender to that. And so Mother really helped him slay that last arrow, and it said that in that, Siddhartha really awakened and became the Buddha. And so I'm not by any means comparing myself to the Buddha, but that did come to mind about doubt. That doubt is a big one. But that I thought by sharing our experiences, perhaps it will ignite something in someone else in our community. Interest, curiosity, seeking. And if you can ignite interest, curiosity, and seeking in someone, then maybe that can lead to wisdom, that can lead to their own insights, that can lead to opening and expansion. And so that's what we'll do. I'm going to start out, I'll tell you a little bit about how I became a part of the center, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about some of my own meditation experience practice. This is Raja Yoga Month, I understand.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I first became a member of the center in 2004. I had done my anesthesia training in Boston at Brigham and Women's, and I came back here to do my fellowship, which is extra training in adult and pediatric cardiac anesthesia. Came back here in 1994 to do that. So I had been out of my training for about 10 years when I met Swami Yogashananda and became a member of this center. And I have to say, at that 10-year mark, it was kind of a period of, it was definitely a period of struggle for me. You know, by 10 years out of your training, you think you'd be settled into what you're doing, but there was this myth that, you know, things would get better, it would get easier, and I believed that myth. You know, after you finish your training, after you take your written boards, after you take your oral boards, after you're a junior attending for a while, after you get more experience, all of this will get easier. And I found that it didn't. That was my experience. It really wasn't getting easier. I was going to a yoga studio, and I saw a notice that a Swami Yogashananda was going to talk on a Sunday afternoon about consciousness. And I was off that Sunday, and I decided that I should make that lecture. And that is when I first met Swami Yogashananda, talking about consciousness. And it was very interesting because on a daily basis, I dealt with consciousness. I dealt with consciousness with a small c. I put children to sleep and woke them up. But I knew nothing about consciousness with a big C. And I decided that it was time for me to learn about that. And so I started coming to the center. I started studying with Swami Yogashananda, and I do want to acknowledge that I went to medical school here at Emory, and I was fortunate enough and privileged enough to have Dr. Majmudar teach me pathology as a medical student. And so in 2004, when I came back to the center and saw him here, it was such a wonderful homecoming to have him here and to become a part of this community with him. So Swami Yogashananda really helped me at that point in my life, I think in two major ways. He taught me the mindset of karma yoga, which I knew nothing about. He taught me that through his lectures. He taught me that through studies of the Gita, of the Upanishads, of different books. He really taught me the mentality of giving back, of service, and yet of allowing the outcome to rest in something larger and to not be so attached to it. So he really taught me that, which helped me greatly at the time. Taught me about something larger. And he also taught me meditation. He taught me first more mantra-type meditation, mantra-based meditation, but then we explored different types of meditation. We explored Vipassana meditation, we explored loving kindness meditation, metta meditation, we explored meditation on light, meditation on sounds, we explored all different types of meditation. It's one of the things I loved about him, because whenever you'd get stuck in one thing, he would allow you to kind of open up into something different, switch gears. That really seemed to help me settle into what I did. It began to let me let go a little bit of the struggles that I had with patients that did well. That was easy, but patients that didn't do well, that was a bit harder. In fact, that was really hard. You expected them to do well, but they didn't. You looked at your own responsibility within that, but allowing that letting go and allowing it to be was really, really important. And it also allowed me to realize the stress that I held. I know we all hold stress, but to really look at it and not to try to push it away or make it better, but to really just sit with it. And it can be stressful, and I think I pushed away the stress. I didn't want to think about it. But learning meditation allowed me to hold it and to say, yeah, it's pretty stressful to take a baby away from their mom's arms, give them some really noxious drugs that no matter what drugs you have for anesthesia, they affect the heart. There is no anesthetic drug that doesn't depress cardiac function. And these are babies that already have bad hearts, so no matter what I choose is going to make them worse. But I'm going to give it to them anyway, because it's going to make them unconscious, so we can put them on a heart-lung machine and open up their heart and try to fix their heart. And then fill the heart back up with blood and take them off the heart-lung machine, and then try to stop the bleeding and get them to the ICU so that they can get better and get well and go home. And so that's just a little bit of stress. And And if you take that stress and then maybe you add on top of that the stress of the parents that are very scared, and that fear manifests in different ways. Sometimes it manifests in anger. Sometimes it manifests in extreme gratitude. Sometimes it manifests in pushing away or distraction. But there's the stress of that. And then I have to work with a surgeon, and a lot of our cardiac surgeons, as you can imagine, have a fairly big ego to think that they can open up someone's heart and fix it and close it up and make them well. And that's not a bad thing, that's actually a good thing. But I have to deal with those personalities, and they can be very stressful to deal with. And then if you throw on top of that the fact that we're understaffed, and so maybe we're working too many hours and too many late days, and then if you throw on top of that the fact that maybe you don't have the best help, because we're understaffed in terms of our help as well, and then if you throw on top of that maybe the nurse is distracted for some reason, and I don't mean to pick on the nurse, maybe it's somebody else or anybody in the room that's distracted, maybe it's you that's distracted, maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep the night before and you're just really tired. And so I finally had to realize, oh, wow, this is a little bit stressful. And I think that learning the mindset of karma yoga, learning meditation as Swami taught it, really helped to save my career. I'm not sure that I would be doing this today, 27 years later, had I not had that experience with him. And now, once again, meditation is kind of changing and informing my life as I'm getting older, because I have been doing this for 27 years. It's getting harder. These are pretty long surgeries, as you can imagine. And it's getting harder just in a physical sense to stand in an operating room for 12 hours. If I do that for a couple of days in a row, I notice it. I kind of wake up and I'm like, oh man, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. Whereas when I was younger, I could just do it. And I've also been noticing that the kind of suffering that can exist in the medical community, and wellness is beginning to become a kind of a buzz phrase in the medical community. They've been doing a lot of surveys. In fact, there was a survey of all physicians that was published, I want to say it was in JAMA, and it wasn't to anesthesiologists specifically, but it was to all physicians. And the burnout rate for physicians based on this burnout survey that they sent was like 54%. I mean, like crazy high. There was a survey of anesthesia residents. They're called CA3s. It stands for Categorical Anesthesia 3. You need to do 3 years of categorical anesthesiology before you can become an anesthesiologist. And so they surveyed CA3 residents who were finishing their training. And according to the burnout surveys that they had them take, 53 to 57% of our residents going out into practice were already burnt out.
Oh, wow.
That is tragic. I mean, that is just tragic. They haven't even started their careers, and they're already feeling burnout. And there was a survey that was sent out to kind of score what they found to be the hardest. And it wasn't taking care of sick patients. And it wasn't compassion fatigue, and it wasn't all of those things. The top 3 things were too many bureaucratic tasks, too many hours at work, and feeling like a cog in the wheel. Those were the top 3 things that led to burnout. And so a couple of years ago, I saw it advertised. I had been thinking that I wanted to do more teaching of meditation to anesthesia residents, maybe medical students, and I saw a course that actually spoke to me. It was a 2-year online course in mindfulness meditation, and the 2 main teachers are well known in the mindfulness meditation community, Tara Brock and Jack Kornfield, and it is sponsored through the University of California, Berkeley, but they're the 2 main teachers. And there's some other sub-teachers. And I thought, Well, 2 years, that sounds like there's some substance to it, and I certainly want something with substance to it. And you know, how hard can it be? I mean, I went to medical school, right? I mean, how hard can mindfulness meditation be? Well, it's actually been quite a challenge. I started February 1st of 2019, so I'm just about to finish my first year. And then I'll move into my second year. And the first year of the course, there have been 3 main things that we've done. The core of it is a lecture every week. It's an online video lecture every week. We've had 2 weeks off, so we didn't have 52. We've had, I think we're about to have number 50. And I was like, wow, what can they teach us? We've learned we went from what is meditation to the foundations of mindfulness meditation to mindfulness of the body, thoughts, feelings, how the mind works, studies in neuroplasticity, what is compassion, mindfulness of pain, how to work with pain patients, how to work with trauma patients. So, I mean, it's been a really robust curriculum. Every week there is a homework assignment, which is about 3 to 5 questions that you have to contemplate and answer based on the week's lecture. The second part of it has been the mentor group. We meet twice a month for 2 hours, twice a month. And the mentor group is very small. It was 7 of us plus my mentor. One lady, unfortunately, one of my colleagues, had some issues with a sick child and had to step aside and say, I can't do this right now. So now there's actually 6 of us with the mentor. But we meet twice a month and do practices and discussions and talk about topics. And that's been very enriching. And then the third component of it has been the reading assignments and the book, the book studies that we've been doing. And I would say that one of the main things that I have gotten out of that practice is that it's really allowed me to reset. It's really helped me reset my meditation practice. It's allowed it to become less of a box that I was checking off because, I meditate today, 20 minutes, check. And to really become more of a resourcing, something that sustains, something that nourishes, allowing that meditation practice to really become a home and a shelter, to be the understanding, to be the comfort, to be the compassion, to be a refuge, something that will hold me, as opposed to this idea of, I think I had gotten into the point of checking a box. Meditated today. In this very busy and hurried world in which I live in, very complicated world, I suspect many of you do too, it's allowed me to do a U-turn and invite in simplicity. To allow myself the time for beingness and not just all of the doingness. And to really be able to find a balance between engagement in the world and in what I do with my patients and colleagues and stuff, but to also find the ease, the rest, the replenishment, the resourcefulness, the peace to exist in this very hurried world. And so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the insights that I recently had on a meditation retreat that I went on. It was a 8-day silent meditation retreat, and I'm looking out in the audience, and I know there are people out there who've done longer than 8 days. But this happened to be an 8-day retreat. And I guess if you consider the day we registered and the day we left, it was actually 10 days, but it was 8 full days. But I did have a few insights, 3 of them that I'd like to share. But again, Pachatum, you know, it's hard to translate someone's experience into someone else's, but I will share. So I went to this retreat over Thanksgiving. It was called Presence and Peace, a Thanksgiving retreat. And I had kind of gotten myself really busy, unfortunately, before I went to that retreat. Things were kind of nuts. I had applied for an NIH grant that was due November 1st. I was revising a book chapter that was due November 15th. We were working on a really important research article that we were trying to get published in a big anesthesia journal. And on top of all of that, our annual meeting for the Congenital Cardiac Anesthesia Society is in the spring, and you have to submit your research ideas and presentations to see if they'll be picked to be presented at the meeting. So we were doing that as well. Plus, I was taking care of patients and doing my normal stuff. So it was a little out of control, so, and I recognized that. So anyway, I went to the retreat center, and the first thing you did was you went and you registered, and you got assigned your dorm room, and then you got assigned a work duty.
Where was this?
This was at Spirit Rock, north of San Francisco, in a place called Woodacre, California. And the last thing you did before you went up to your dorm room was you turned off and turned in your cell phone. Oh. That was something. So, let's see. My first insight was embrace the yin. There's so much yin, there's so little yang. And this is a very sophisticated audience. You guys know yin and yang. In fact, the symbol is right up there, up over Elizabeth there in the corner. Right there. So it was first discussed in Chinese philosophy in the 3rd century BC. And the idea is that there was chaos reigned, and when the universe was formed, chaos came into a balance, into a harmony. And not just for living things, but for all things. They reside in that harmony of the yin and the yang. And I'll start with the yang. The yang is represented as the white part of it. If you look at the black and white symbol, it's day, it's male, it's considered masculine energy. It's represented by fire and heat, activity, accomplishment, productivity, movement, fast, external connection. And it's not necessarily bad, it's good, it can be good, but it's outgoing, it's external energy. And I realized, wow, I've got a lot of that in my life. There is less of the yin, which is represented in the black and white symbol as the black. It's the night energy. The symbols are water, coolness, calm, rest, creativity, intuition, stillness, calm, internal, restorative. And so that was one of my insights, was to embrace the yin. And I'll just read. I did bring a journal with me. We didn't read a book. I had a single room. Nobody would have known if I would have brought a book to read or not. But I wanted to respect the fact that this was a time of going inside to look at our own stuff, and that one of the purposes of silence is for me not to get it caught in your story and you not to get caught in my story. That can be very distracting, right? The whole retreat, I'd want to know, wow, who is that, and where are they from, and do they have kids, and what kind of work do they do, and why are they here, and oh, let me tell them that about me, and that's very distracting. Yeah. So is a book, right? A book is very distracting. But I did decide to journal, and I actually found that very helpful. And so this was the night we checked in. I called it Not Yet Day One. But we went for an instruction period from 4 to 5, and then our first meditation, the silence, began at 5, and it went from 5 to 5:45, and then we had dinner. But we started silence right after that instruction period from 4 to 5, and then we were silent. And so I wrote this: Not yet day one, so busy, and now there's nothing from warp speeds to stop. I'm not really sure how the next 8 days will go. I think I'm tired, but I'm not sure tired is the right word. In our first meditation, I became aware of a constant, continuous, low level of quivering energy. I felt it in my upper chest, my arms, my neck, and my jaw. Yes, especially my jaw. I think it's stress, chronic stress. Stress that has so integrated into my being, it's just become part of my normal life. Will it settle? Will it dissipate? I guess over the next 8 days, I will find out. And so I had to settle. And it took some time. About day 3, that started going away. But it really wasn't until day 5 that I really noticed a difference in my body, a real difference in the way I inhabited my body and the way it walked throughout the world. And I realized that I had this illusion that I handle my stress well. You know, I eat right, I meditate, I try to get some exercise, I try to sleep. I'm doing this really well. And I realized that, no, I'm not. I'm not doing this well at all. I'm carrying this in my body constantly with me all the time. And so I learned a new set point. And I notice it comes back now that I'm back in the thick of things. But I also have a new set point to try to get to. I also have a new way where I can embrace that yin and try to really settle and see what I need to nourish myself. Where can I find that refuge? Where can I find that replenishment, that resourcing? Where in my meditation can I find that? So that was my first insight, embrace the yin. So my second insight was that with our thoughts we make the world. You guys know that line. It's from the Dhammapada, the teachings of the Buddha. It must have been pretty important. Now the Buddha lived a couple of hundred years before the Dhammapada was actually written, but it must have been important because the very first verses of the Dhammapada, the opening lines of the Dhammapada, are the following. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So for insight number 2, I have to tell you a little bit about our day. We woke up at 5:30. It was a bell, a gong. Someone went through the dorms ringing a bell. And the first meditation started at 6 in the morning, and it was the longest meditation of the day. It actually was my favorite meditation. I learned, and I know this about myself, my mind is so much more settled in the morning. I can really just settle in. And we began it with chanting. We ended it with chanting. And it was just beautiful because the altar was in front of this big expanse of windows that looked out of the California hills, you know, and the sun would just start to come up in the morning as you were sitting there meditating. And it was just, it was bliss. I mean, it was just wonderful. And then after that meditation usually ended somewhere around 7:15 or 7:20, but then you had to go down the hill to the dining hall, And there were probably about 60 of us there, and there were 2 lines, buffet lines, and so 30 people had to go through each line. And then in the back, they had tea and juices and stuff in the back, but they didn't have coffee. And if you wanted coffee, they had written and told us you could bring your own coffee, but you had to make it for yourself. And they had little individual single cup coffee makers, so you had to sit there and drip your coffee. And I actually don't drink caffeine, but I love my decaf in the morning, I have to say. I'm really attached to it. I'm aware of that attachment. And so I'd have to sit there and drip my coffee. And then my work period, which was cleaning the courtyard, started at 8. Okay? So I always kind of felt rushed, which is kind of crazy, but because there was nobody there with a whip. Like, if I didn't show up at 8 o'clock to sweep the courtyard, I don't think like anything would have happened, but here I am, I'm a little bit compulsive, so I wanted to start my work duty on time. Okay, so this is day 5. I was standing on the porch outside the dining hall having a cup of coffee. I had left the morning meditation early that day. Rather than return for the final chanting, I decided to skip it in lieu of extra time at breakfast for a second cup of coffee. You see, breakfast always felt rushed for me. My cleaning duty started at 8, and for 4 days I had been dreaming about a second cup of coffee. So I seized the opportunity. In retrospect, I really missed the final morning chants and concluded that the second cup of coffee wasn't worth it. Note to self, what we desire is not always as good as we think it will be. Anyway, I was standing on the porch outside the dining hall having my first cup of coffee, alone and of course in silence. It was a misty morning after the torrential rains that came through the previous night. There was a cold dampness in the morning air. The clouds were thick and heavy. They hung low between the hills. The early morning sun was trying to peer through an area where the clouds were not so dense, and in doing so, it cast a shimmering golden hue throughout the wet air. As I stood there, I felt a profound sense of peace. For 4 full days, there had been no work, no computer, no emails, no stress. And I stood there for quite some time, just being, melting into the goldenness that enveloped the world. And then I heard the bell ring indicating that it was time for breakfast, and I saw my mind do it. I literally saw my mind have a thought. It was like watching the stock symbols run across the ticker tape at Times Square, but instead it was my thought. And it was a thought that I usually attach stress to. You better get going or you'll be late for your work duty. Now, I actually didn't feel the stress. I was completely disconnected from the familiar reaction I normally attach to this thought. My body was completely relaxed as I observed the thought from afar. And I laughed out loud as I found it completely absurd that in this serenity, my mind would actually create stress. But I watched it happen, and at first it was humorous. But then the sadness began to arise as I wondered how many times, hundreds, no, thousands of times during my daily life, does my mind create a stressful thought, but I do believe it. I do react to it. I internalize it, even if subconsciously. And I recalled the words of the Buddha, "With our thoughts we make the world." And in that moment, those words never sounded so true. So, with our thoughts, we make the world. And then insight number 3, final insight that I had. I'll just have to read it to you, but it was, the leaves will never stop falling. So, my insight number 3. My work duty And it's interesting to me because from a very simple task of sweeping leaves, I had a insight that was pachatam, profound insight, individually experienced by me. And I actually found that in my life from time to time, that from something very simple, I can have a much larger, profounder insight. So insight number 3, the leaves will always keep falling. My work duty was to clean the courtyard and pick up the turkey shit. Yep, that's right, turkey shit. It was originally explained to me as sweeping the courtyard. I thought that would be easy, but actually it was a lot more. There was a large fountain in the courtyard, which I also had to clean. That baffled me until I realized that I only had to clean off the ledges. I also learned that there were wild turkeys in the area. At night, they liked to come and drink out of the fountain. They would stand on the rather large ledge and take a drink, but they would also poop while doing so. And so every morning there was turkey poop all around the courtyard, especially near the fountain and along the ledge. And yep, I got to clean it up. For the first few days, it was all about the cleaning. I like to clean, and I actually enjoy sweeping, so I thought I'd do a good job. I would make that courtyard spotless. But the leaves from the surrounding trees kept falling, and the turkeys kept coming, and it was actually a real struggle to keep it up. I became very angry at my partner cleaner. You see, someone else had been assigned to clean the courtyard in the afternoon. What the hell was she doing? And then one day, day 3, I think, I looked at the assignment board only to realize that she was actually assigned to clean the back courtyard, not the front one. It was a much smaller courtyard with no fountain and without any turkey poop. By day 4, I was into my community and the role within it, even though I didn't know anyone's name, nor had I spoken to anyone. But there was definitely a bond. And I realized that when people did their walking meditation, you see, we alternated. We'd do 45 minutes of sitting and 45 minutes of walking, and we would alternate that throughout the day. And I realized that as people did their walking meditation, people would pick the same path. Certain people would have a path in the courtyard or along the ledge, the rather large ledge of the fountain, but certain people would always walk the same path for their walking meditation. And so I decided that as I was cleaning the courtyard, I was actually sweeping, and that as I was sweeping away leaves, dust, and debris, I was actually clearing a path to enlightenment for my fellow retreatants. I would sweep away their attachment, their grasping, hatred, delusion, and clear a path for them. As they did their walking meditation in the courtyard, a clear path would literally light their way. It would help them achieve a clarity of heart and mind. Day 7. I finally surrendered to the fact that I will never actually clean this courtyard. At least not permanently. The leaves keep falling and the turkeys keep coming. And in a few days, at the end of this retreat, my broom will be passed on to another who will continue the quest. The same is true for my work. One day, I will leave my work and another will take over my position and my projects. In the meantime, I will do what I can and just keep sweeping. I will mindfully discern which path to clear today, and not with recklessness, because I've noticed that between the cracks and the cement slabs reside all kinds of living things. Spiders, beetles, little creatures I've never seen before. And if I sweep away all of the leaves and debris, I will destroy their homes, their shelters, their places of refuge. I've also noticed that I can't lean too hard into the broom. If I don't stand upright, erect with good posture, I only further hurt my already injured back. All I can do is wisely discern for today which path to clear, knowing that everyone has to walk over leaves and turkey poop at some point in their life, and there is very little I can do to stop that. All I can do is clear today's thoughtfully chosen path with the dignity and humility that it deserves. And therein lies the peace and ease that I search for, and therein lies the care that this world deserves. So, Pachitam Viditabu Vinuhiti. We have to experience within ourselves our meditation experiences, our insights. But I think by taking a moment to stop, I don't think you have to go on a silent meditation retreat. I think you just have to commit to some time to stop, to make that U-turn, to look inside, to find a refuge for yourself, to find a shelter for yourself, to find simplicity for yourself. So, with that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Will you take questions?
Sure, or comments, or,
Comment?
yeah, in the back.
Just wanted to share two quick experiences which relate to your last insight, which to me was the most powerful, about the leaves are still falling. The first insight is that I cleaned my own yard for many years when I first started working, like many of us begin, until I got tired of it and got a yard man. But before that, I had worked on the yard for a good time. I fully empathize with your experience that the leaves kept falling. And then, one day, the neighbor, a lady who was much older than me, maybe 30 years older than me, she was driving off and she took the time to stop her car, roll down the window, and she said, "It's nice to see you cleaning your own yard. But have you noticed one thing? The blessing that you have when you are cleaning the yard is always remember each leaf falls only once."
That's lovely.
So that made my day, and I felt much better about my yard cleaning.
Thank you for sharing that. That is lovely.
And when the yard cleaner came, and he is, like you described yourself, one of the most spotless yard cleaners you will ever find. And I fortunately found him because I saw him cleaning the neighbor's yard, and at that point we couldn't find anybody else. So I just walked over and I said, "Will you clean our yard?" And he's been the finest. Now, whenever I saw him, I remembered my days and then wanted to compliment him. So one day I went and said, "You do such a great job, thank you." And he turned around, he had a good laugh, and he said, "You know, really, I don't know what I do. I come here, I clean your yard, it looks so good when I leave. I come the next morning to clean the neighbor's yard, it looks as bad as it was when I came yesterday.
Right,
So I really don't know what I'm doing."
right.
And so I think the sort of deep gravitas thought that I had through all this, you know, all of us are going to fall as leaves only once. And so we have to make every single effort to make sure that falling of the leaf is worth it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's lovely. Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you.
Simple, insightful,
Thank you.
and direct experience. That's what always, you know, when you read about these seminars or study groups, and you wonder, what do they do? Do they meditate all day, all the time? But it's good to hear that there are breaks in between,
Mm-hmm.
that you have time to digest,
Yeah.
take a walk, and without speaking, you observe. And when you go inside, you observe your own mind.
Yes.
And that to me, you can do anywhere, but it's nice to be in a formal environment sometimes to learn some of the techniques
Mm-hmm.
and learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have to step out of ourselves. I did for a bit. That was important for me to step outside. And I don't know that you have to, but at some point, sometimes that can be quite helpful, is to step out of yourself and just.
And I enjoy
elsewhere.
your notes also. Very brighter.
Did you feel your ego? Did you question that you had to clean the poop? I mean, I'm a doctor, and or how did you manage with that, or did you feel anything, or?
No, I honestly, I just thought, wow, they could have told me what I really had to do here. It was funny because when I signed up for the duty, they said, oh, you'll just sweep the courtyard. You just have to sweep the leaves. But there's where the brooms are. There's a cabinet between the two restrooms, and when you open the cabinet, you'll see the brooms and the buckets and stuff. And there's a thing in there, and just read all that you have to do. Just read what you have to do. There are instructions in there, and then you found out all you had to do. Then they were honest. But I think it's helpful. It's like he was saying, you don't take yourself quite as seriously. You step aside. You're like, there's some levity in it. There's some lightness of being that comes from it.
First, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It was really great to hear and very insightful, so thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is, so after this retreat that you took, can you talk a little bit about how you sort of re-entered into your, your daily life, and how you've been able to sort of carry that peace and stillness with you as you went back to your daily routine?
That is a great question, because it has been difficult. There's no doubt. One of the hardest parts was going from, and I had to get back.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't take time because I had to get back to work. I just didn't have that much time off, and so I went straight from a silent retreat to the San Francisco International Airport, which I would not recommend anyone ever doing. That was not a good idea. It was like overload. And I have never heard so loudly in an airport the background music that they play continuously. I mean, it was just like, it was so loud. I was like, wow, why are they doing that? And don't people notice? And why hasn't anybody told them to shut that off? But more importantly, I think it goes to that experiencing thing. I mean, I really had a reset of experiencing in my body what it felt like. And once you have that experience, you want to hold on to it. And there's a memory in your body about it. It's like my body remembers. And it wants to get back there. And now it notices when it drifts too far away. It's like, oh, I'm drifting. Whoa, let's get back. And so there was a real gift of a reset in that. And I don't know how long the remembering in my body will last, because I'm not really remembering in my head. That kind of has gone away a little bit, except for reading the notes. But the remembering in my body is still there. And so I'm trying to hold on to it and hope that doesn't go away.
Nana, it's such a wonderful experience you had. But, the way I don't know, because it reminded me a story of mother, but I don't know how much is related here.
Mm-hmm.
But this gentleman has been cleaning up all the arounds in Jairambadi, in the mother's grounds and all those things. And for a few years he has been doing that, and then one of the Swami said, you are old now, why don't you, take it off, we'll give you the money. But his answer was, I'm not working for the money. So, I think that is where you use that, in the later days, that it's not only your meditation and the silence, it is your karma yoga part also got into it.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. Yeah. I think that's true, that karma yoga part of, like the man said, I'm not doing it for the money. That's the karma yoga set.
You say you experience with different meditations, different types or different forms or ways. Which one has been the most helpful to you and why?
Well, it's one thing I really have gratitude to Swami Y about. I'm not completely attached to any one type of meditation. I think my preference is to really allow my mind to settle. And I'm often so focused at work that doing a concentration on a mantra often becomes hard. It feels like just the same thing. And so I really like the expansiveness of just an insight Vipassana type meditation where the mind kind of opens and expands and holds. But honestly, I think to keep it new, to keep it fresh, just depends, for me at least, my experience is that it kind of depends on where I am. In the mornings, when I'm settled and my mind is fresh, it's beautiful. At night sometimes, if I come home, if I've had a busy day, God, it's like I sit down and there is like a thought storm that just like almost blows me over. And so in those situations, a type of meditation, maybe a mantra actually does help me kind of settle. I'll often do a visualization. I'm from New Orleans, so I'm into storms, and so I like the visualization of the thought storm or hurricane whirling around me as I sit in the middle, the eye of the storm where it's calm. So it kind of depends on my mood and where I am, and I try not to be attached to any one thing, but to do what settles me. And if one thing isn't working, I will often shift to another thing. And I've certainly had periods in my life, and I know everyone here has had periods in their life where it's just really hard to meditate. I mean, maybe you've gone through some tragedy or some hard time, or you have a deep sorrow or a deep grief, and it's like, I just cannot sit and meditate. But just sitting and doing whatever you can, just whatever you can, maybe it's focusing on the light of a candle or a color, or, I had some meditations when I was really struggling one point in my life where my cat would come sit next to me and I would just focus on her purring. That was all I could do, was just think about the purring and let myself settle. So just, whatever you can do to just sit, and then with time and patience, I think it comes through my experience.
See, the word burnout seems to be getting very, very widespread, like a fire. It is burning out. Everyone says the same thing. Physicians say the same thing. The lawyers say the same thing. Yesterday there was a meeting of the emergency medical vehicle operators, and they say we are burned out.
Wow.
We have suicidal thoughts. There is the extreme of burnout in which you get suicide. I was thinking as you were saying that Vedanta itself is also no sure proof that you will not burn out of that one. Burnout perhaps comes when you have repeatedly, endlessly keep on doing that thing which you inside detest. So it could be, I'm giving you example of one Swami, he became a school bus driver from here. And he was a very delightful man. But at some point he said, this is not for me. So then what you say, that step out of yourself to me is the remedy.
Mm.
Because when you don't step out, that means everything is stepping in. And then it can reach to a point of suffocation,
Mm.
despair, depression, and ultimately self-destructive. So that getting out, and Vedanta gives a good opportunity for you to get out if you want to. And that's the part I enjoy the most.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right, in getting out of yourself, you're really opening up to something larger. It's like the story where Siddhartha reaches out and touches the earth, you know, and really finds his existence in a larger sense. Steps out of the smaller ego into something much bigger.
Would you go to the same camp, same experience now, given a second chance?
Would I do what?
Would you go through the same camp, same experience, given a chance? Would you have another 8 days spent in the same place?
Oh, I'd love to one day. Yeah, absolutely. I'm still digesting this one, so I need to
That's
wait a
okay.
little bit. As those of you who have been to silent retreats, shorter, longer, whatever, I mean, it's profound. It's not always easy. In fact, there were some big struggles there, but and I think it takes a while to digest it. But yeah, absolutely. I absolutely will do that again
That's very
at some point.
That's part of my question too. Do you think this is like vaccine that you keep taking booster shot?
You know, I think if you have the opportunity to do it and it calls to you, but again, I don't want to stand up here and imply that everybody needs to do that. I mean, I think we can do that within our daily lives too.
Because I thought that it looks wonderful, feels wonderful while you are there, but once you come back to life in your daily job, whatever it is,
Yeah.
but then the effect gradually wears off.
I think that's why we need our daily practice to help
Yeah.
us sustain. Yeah, yeah. And Shankar knows the story better than I do, but you know, Ramakrishna goes to the rooftop, but then you come back down, right? I mean,
And doing so discovers that the stairs are made of the same substance as the rooftop.
yeah.
So that is when that discovery is made, it's very comforting.
Mm-hmm.
Raj had a question.
The turkey poop isn't such an issue.
It isn't such an issue. Two more over here, and then Raj.
What would you say to someone who says that they feel like they get more benefit from exercising for 20 minutes, or you know, that the juice isn't worth the squeeze, you know, of sitting on a cushion and going through all of that? What would be your response to them?
Well, my experience, and actually, I can't take credit for this because actually Swami Y was the one who deserves the credit for this. I very much got my meditative experience from running, and I'm not running right now because I hurt my back, but I hope to get back to running, and I love those types of meditative experiences. But honestly, when I'm running, my mind is not disengaged. I am paying attention. If I'm outside, I'm paying attention to the cracks in the cement, or the red light, whether it's red or green, or the car that I have to try to negotiate with as I cross the street, or whatever it is. If I'm on the treadmill, I'm still paying attention, and my mind is not, there's a part of my mind that's still engaged that's not when I'm sitting on a cushion. And I'm not judging it, I'm not, because I do it, and so I don't want to judge it, and that really works for some people, and that's all they need. But for me, it helped to do more and to just sit.
Are you able to, I mean, when people come into meditation because they're burned out, and they have, I presume if you're seeking meditation to relieve your burnout, that there's an expectation that you're going to have more serenity or have less stress. I wonder can you work with people having an expectation of some result like that?
I hope so. I really hope so, and I may be able to answer that better in about 4 or 5 years, but I've started doing some mindfulness meditation with our fellows, our pediatric anesthesia fellows. So they've finished their residency and they've come to us to do extra training in pediatric anesthesia. And we just started. This is just the first year that we've started it. But they seem to be really enjoying it. They seem to be really liking it and finding it different from the usual education curriculum and allowing them a way to approach their future as pediatric anesthesiologists in a way that that can sustain them and support them. We'll see. I hope it works for them. But we're certainly trying that experiment.
At Emory Medical School, they have started with the meditation session for the first year and the second year medical students.
That's awesome.
And oh yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Raj, you still have a college question?
One last question from Raj.
Okay, well, it just reminds me that anytime you are working in a medical setup, it's interesting how I was very young when I started working as a social worker, and I dealt with cancer patients. And initially I felt so, every time I go home, wow, what's this person is going to happen? And for a while it was struggle mentally to think that what am I going to, what can I do about it? And to accept that part was challenge. What I was going to say is, I think the meditation seems to me a part of it that you learn the self-listening in a sense, because it reminds me like in Gita, the first chapter is all he talks, Arjun. The rest he listens. 70 chapters, you think about it too. And my question to you is that you guys were quiet all the time, and you mentioned the word bonding. And when during the time of lunch, dinner and breakfast, how was the reaction? How guys, you had any kind of communication? What was situation? What was scenario like that?
Well, they say that most of our communication is nonverbal anyway. No, we never spoke during any of the meals. It was actually quite lovely to have meals with people and not speak, where all we did was sit next to someone and eat. And there was a very sweet moment. It was after lunch one day, and we tended to have keep the same place in the meditation hall. Some people would move around, but then there was a whole group of us that was like, okay, this is my spot, right? I've claimed it. And there was a guy who had a spot next to me. And throughout the whole 8 days, we had the same spot next to each other. I don't know his name. I don't know where he's from. I don't know anything about him. But we had this connection. And one day after lunch, I was still finishing my lunch because I had gotten there a little bit late. And he had gone and he had gotten a cup of tea, and there were very few of us still in the lunch hall, but he got a cup of tea and he just brought his cup of tea and he came down and he sat across the table from me and he bowed to me and he sat there and he drank his tea while I finished my lunch. And it was just beautiful. It was just, the company was beautiful. And we never said a word to each other. It was lovely. So, yeah, very heart-opening.
Knowing how close you are to your mom, did you call her during these 8 days?
No, and she knew it. She knew I would not be able to talk to her, so yeah. She did well.
She said at the very beginning, you had to turn in your cell phone, no way to talk to anyone. So, what a wonderful, wonderful hour with you, Nina. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
Let let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. And as you might expect, there is a lovely table of things for us to share inside, coffee and tea, and the fellowship of our wonderful congregation. Please join us inside, and we will continue this conversation there. And Nina, as you know, normally I sit in that one chair. If you would take that chair today so that people can come and talk with you, that would be good.